Good afternoon, President Palmer. It's 1:30. We're going to let members of the public in.
Okay, excellent. Okay, well, we are 1:30. One of our members is due to arrive any moment. So let's begin the meeting. Let's call this meeting to order, please. Claudia, would you please do a roll call?
Gladly. Good afternoon, board members. All right. President Palmer. Thank you. Director Millibar.
Here.
Thank you. Director Martin.
Here.
Director Luna. Director Stromera.
Here. Hi.
Hi. Director Chang.
Here.
Thank you. And Director Anatawi.
Here.
President Palmer, we have a quorum.
Great. Okay, and I will just mention that the Director Stromera is attending from Valley, and when we get, do you want to announce the alternates as well at this point?
Yes, President Palmer. So we have that I see online. We have alternate Director Tincher and alternate Director Dennis Lamoureux, and it looks like alternate Director Wee just joined us.
Thank you.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
We have a really, truly important announcement, which I want to do before we begin the rest of the meeting, and that is Yadira Rodriguez. Happy birthday! Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Yara. Happy birthday to you. There, now that we have the most important business done. Then what we're going to do at this point is we're going to go into closed session. We will be back out of closed session approximately 2 o'clock. So see you then. Okay, we're back. Right, it is 2:10. Sorry, we're 10 minutes late, folks, but we are out of closed session and nothing to report. So here's we go. We get on to approval of the minutes of January 24th, 2024. Do we have any? Well, it didn't. Oh, and Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, sorry about that. Pledge of Allegiance. I should know that. I've got my rotary pin on, and we always do that, right? Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, to the republic which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, so now let's go ahead now to approval of the minutes. And do we have any no? Whoops. Okay. He's always adjusting me here. Do we have any comments on the minutes or any changes or anything anybody noticed? Nope. Do we have approval?
Motion for approval.
Thank you, Tony. So Tony Stromera. And do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. Millibar, second. Okay, great. Let's do a roll vote, please.
Gladly. Good afternoon. President Palmer.
Yes.
Thank you. Director Millibar. Director Martin.
Yes.
Director Luna.
Yes.
Director Stromera.
Aye.
Director Chang.
Aye.
And Director Anatawi.
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you. Minutes approved.
Okay. Now let us get then on to the discussion items, starting out with the February DCA monthly report.
Thank you, President Palmer. Good afternoon. I'll let Claudia catch up here. Great. Claudia, yeah, let's go to section 1, please. A couple items I'd like to highlight for January 24 activities. We have completed our mid-year budget review and contract review process. This is what I refer to as a mid-year reconciliation within our cycle. This allows us to look at all the work that's been proposed and contracted through various task orders, assess our progress, consider any potential changes. We do address potential changes through the year as a continual process, but this mid-year point really forces an opportunity to think hard about what we're doing and what we'd like to do in the second half of the year. There can be opportunities to shift focus. There can be needs to reassess our approach on certain items that we identified at the beginning of the year. I certainly don't view change as a bad thing. It's a natural process, but this mid-year reconciliation allows us to really get our arms around the status of our fiscal year budget. How are we doing? You'll recall that for the first half of the year, we tend to show a full expenditure of our fiscal year budget, and we kind of hold back until we reach this midpoint before we really start to acknowledge and reflect on potential underruns, or fortunately hasn't been an issue yet, overruns. But you know, we kind of give ourselves the first half of the year to sort through that, work our way through it, and then take this mid-year opportunity to really force that reassessment, formalize those changes within contracts and task orders, and then start to daylight what we think our estimate at completion will be for the fiscal year. So when I get to the table, we won't need to go there just yet, but when I get there, we are now starting to forecast an underrun of just under 4 million for the fiscal year, and I'll talk about, you know, why that is as we work our way through the monthly report. But we have completed that mid-year process and are now reflecting those updates within our existing contracts as well as within our financials. On the administrative side, you know, one thing we also are starting to get moving again are the alignment tours. We did a number of tours last year. I don't recall how many we did last year. Do you recall, Claudia? About 20 tours last year. That sounds about right. So we've had a little bit of a break, which has been nice, but it's time to get back to that. And we're starting to plan and put those activities in motion to resume our tour activities through the spring and summer and fall. So that activity is moving again.
Change in terms of the way you're going to be doing the tours, in terms of like now if we've progressed further, or pretty much as we have done them in the past?
No, that's a good question. I guess I would say we haven't gotten there yet. I don't foresee any major changes other, you know, only because all last year we were touring the proposed project, the Bethany alignment. Now we have that as the preferred project, but it's the same tour. But you know, as you've been a part of several of those, we have many different variations. And you know, one thing I thought you were alluding to is also the different variations and changes and permutations that we have, and we will continue to add variations tailored to each audience and with really specific interests in mind, and also timelines in mind. Some people can't afford to spend the whole day out there, that kind of thing. So we will continue to look for ways to evolve the tour. Sure. So now looking at our engineering activities for January, we are pretty deep into our updated cost estimate for the Bethany Reservoir alternative. At the same time, we are continuing to evaluate potential innovations that could reduce the impacts, could reduce cost, schedule, or improve constructibility. Our plan at this point is to reflect those potential innovations through what we're calling maybe a secondary estimate. The primary estimate will be a full and detailed bottoms-up estimate in terms of construction activity, soft cost, all the inputs. It will be a full and complete estimate, including budget for community benefits program, better bottoms-up estimation of environmental mitigation costs. You know, really, I think we will view it as an entirely complete budget or cost estimate for the preferred project. The secondary estimate that we will develop using the innovations, those potential cost savings innovations, is likely going to be more of a spin-off approach where we take that primary estimate and then deduct costs associated with various quantity reductions, effort reductions, equipment and labor reductions, and translate those potential innovations into a secondary estimate, just to provide that vision of where we could go in the future and how the cost of the program can be moved by certain potential innovations. They certainly will not be the last innovations that we deal with on this project, but At this point, we're looking at a set that we feel pretty good about at this very early stage. We feel like they have a lot of potential, and certainly something that we want to be talking about. The timeline for the updated estimate is Q2, and we actually have a graphic that we'll get to when we get down to staff reports I'd like to share with you that just lays out some of these activities through the course of the year, and it's something that per the board's preference, we may want to make part of our regular board meeting exhibits. So we could talk about how best to do that as well, but we'll pull that up when we get to the staff reports and the communications section. In terms of field work, we did complete last December the vast majority of the fall program that we had intended. It was a push in December to try and get as much of the work done as we could before the weather moved in and started making ground conditions soft and a lot more difficult for any of the work that's off-road, much of which is off-road. We still have potentially only a few remaining locations that we would still like to pursue, but that's still in the evaluation stages, and we're still working through the team on that. At the same time, we're starting to consider and conceive what the future investigation work will look like. Looking at specifically the Bethany Reservoir alternative, the alignment associated with that alternative. Historically, the work done under the initial study mitigated negative declaration was very broad in scope. We were looking to understand conditions across the Delta and fill in data gaps across the Delta. One key change at this point would be that future investigative work would be more focused and specifically aligned with the preferred project and less so more broadly distributed across the Delta. But we're very early in the planning stages on that work, and I will keep the board updated as we make continued progress. Let's go, Claudia, please, to the budget summary slide. Section 3.
Can I ask a short question about the future geotechnical investigations? How they're going to be all aligned, the east alignment, or what does that entail?
So I guess big picture, ultimately, I guess I'll answer that in a few ways, Director Luna. So at this point, we have collected, I'd say on the order of 170, 180 exploration points distributed throughout the system. And that's been work that we've taken on over the past few years. Some of those were, when you look at the existing data across the Delta, there's a lot of data in the Central Delta. There's a lot of historical data that's been collected along those levees and along previous iterations of the project and other activities throughout the Central Delta. Along especially the eastern margin of the Delta, there's a wide gaps of unknown information, unknown conditions. There just isn't anything out there. Historically, there's very little to be relied upon. And so we've been trying to fill some of those gaps and just provide a little bit more information. We're going to keep doing that type of work, trying to infill gaps. That's going to be likely our next priority, to try and infill some of those really tremendous gaps in subsurface conditions. Ultimately, for design of the project, we're going to need something more, probably 1,500, 2,000 exploration points. But that will, all of that data will ultimately only be necessary for final design of the project. At this point, we're just continuing to try and understand subsurface conditions, the variability in those conditions, helping to continue to refine the assumptions that we've had to make about subsurface, engineering properties, et cetera. So we're going to keep chipping away at that gap in understanding, but we will, will at a point in the future need to then flip over into more of a design level investigative program. Okay. So Claudia, thank you. Let's go to section 3. So we have our approved budget of $40.4 million. These are the revisions that I was mentioning earlier. We now show, first go into the EAC column, second from the right, we're showing our estimate at completion of 36.5 estimated. So that's an underrun of just under 4 million for the fiscal year. At the same time, we've now committed through those task order and contract revisions just under 35 million. So we still have about $1.5 million in reserve within that 36.5 EAC. We're still holding a little bit of reserve funds for uncertainty and potential, relatively small changes in scope. So depending on what happens this spring, largely with surveys and geotech and other activities, we will continue to hone that estimate at completion. And as it makes sense, we will either start to increase that number if we're going to do more work than we've got captured in this 36.5, or if we think things are going to start winding down, we will refine and start releasing some of that contingency as we get closer to the end of the year. So I think this is a good place to be for this midpoint at 36.5. There's a chance that it could go back up depending on the amount of additional work we're able to add this spring and early summer. There's also a chance that it could go down if we're not able to do any substantial additional work, in which case we'll start to reflect that in the EAC. Okay, Claudia, let's go to please the cash flow chart, figure 1. Expenses to date are still tracking very well with planned costs. I keep expecting to have a month where we're way off, but so far this fiscal year, the controls team and all the contract managers have really done a great job in terms of forecasting their activities and then turning those into actual expenditures. So right now we're tracking very close to planned. Now what you'll note here is that the blue line that cuts across, that's the cumulative expenditure line for the forecast. It uses the right-hand axis. It still aligns to the 40.4, so we have not re-baselined the project. We're going to leave that line where it is, and we'll see how things continue to progress through the year. If we end up at 36.5, then obviously our actuals cumulative line, that peak dash line, is going to land about $4 million under the blue line, but we'll see what happens. In the forecast and projections, we had, as you can see by the blue bars, an uptick in activities for the second half of the year. And so we are in the process of moving that forward. There are some increased activities as the result of DWR's decision on the project. But we'll see if we maintain our accuracy or if we're going to start to drift. I suspect we'll drift, but we'll see. Lastly, Claudia, if we could go to the schedule in the back. So in terms of our fiscal year schedule, these are kind of big picture tasks here. The program management support activities, those are ongoing and really kind of linear in terms of how they spend through the year. So we're making the progress we'd like to make there. You will note that we are starting to flag, I guess, a delayed status for the project definition reports. Those are the last item under the engineering category. Those project definition reports are being intentionally, we're not starting those on purpose. This is something that we had laid out. They're really associated with the procurement activities that will eventually be needed. Our vision for the engineering documentation is to have a preferred project engineers report, which I'll show you on the timeline in a minute, but that's going to be prepared by the end of this year, by the end of this fiscal year. So as part of as part of next fiscal year, by the end of this calendar year. That preferred project engineers report will be the big picture document for the Bethany Reservoir alternative that contains all of the engineering documentation. Right now, all of that information is sort of spread out among multiple engineering project reports with different alternatives and different flow rates and different addenda and supplements and other pieces that make it fairly difficult to track. So we will produce a preferred project engineers report that strips out all of those alternatives, strips out the anything that's not relevant to the preferred project, and create a concise and cohesive document that documents all of the information that's been used to date to get us to the EIR preferred project and anything additional that we'd like to provide. That preferred project engineers report would then be supported by essentially basis of design reports, what we were tentatively calling project definition reports. We may still tweak those names, but they're going to be focused on the specific project features and will provide that next level of engineering information that will be necessary for procurement of feature design contractors. At this point, we're still judging the schedule and assessing our priorities in terms of starting into those documents, and just don't feel that it's quite the right time to start into those project definition reports. So as a result, we're not making progress at the moment. We're also reassessing our priorities in terms of which features need to be up first in terms of preparing that engineering documentation. Some of those early features are on the smaller side. So what we had set aside at the beginning of the year is much larger than we'll need likely this year for project definition reports. So that's where a big chunk of that underrun is coming from that I showed you in the cost summary table. Everything else is pretty well on track. Investigation programs, I mentioned, on track. We're wrapping up the lab analysis and all the documentation. Should have our calendar year 2023 data report ready for internal use by the engineering team as they continue to look at subsurface conditions, evaluate those assumptions, and et cetera. So President Palmer, that completes my update, but I'd be happy to take any additional questions.
You have any questions from the board? Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, Graham. I think your conversation about the tours kind of triggered my memory that at the state water contractors, we're also talking about budgets, and part of that is I know that the DCA has a budget for the director tours, and I think the question came up, and you might have discussed this with the state water contractor staff. They were thinking that there's additional budget that's necessary for some other tours outside the scope of the for the director's tour. So I don't know if you've had any conversations with that group over there, but I just want to flag the point that we're also having those discussions in parallel path.
We haven't, we are fully ready and capable to manage tours. There may be a limit. I don't know that we've run up against our budget limit yet. I don't know, Claudia, if you know what we have in terms of a budget limit. I do not for tours. I think we find the funds and make it happen. We have pretty significant reserve set aside as well, which we can tap for those tours. And I do think they're a really important part of what we're doing. And so I'm happy to do that. In terms of coordinating with state water contractors, we're in pretty close coordination with them. And, I suspect there is a gap when it comes to transporting people to us. Once we got them, once they're here, we're happy to take folks out on the tour and provide all the necessary resources. But there certainly could be a gap in terms of getting folks to town here if they don't live locally. And so we would definitely appreciate the help in terms of making that happen.
I didn't mean to suggest there was a problem. I just, thought I would bring it up.
Sure.
Thanks.
Any other questions from the board? Nope. Tony? Nope. All right, then do we have any questions from the public?
President Palmer, it doesn't look like we've received any public comment requests for this item.
Then let's move on to the DCA Environmental Compliance Committee concept.
Thanks, President Palmer. I'll be introducing the item. So with the recent certification of the final EIR, we've been sort of considering next steps and timing on those activities. And in part, that's is included trying to decide when it would be best to establish the Environmental Compliance and Mitigation Committee. This is a committee that's actually specifically identified in our Joint Powers Agreement as well as our bylaws. It needs to be established within 60 days of an approved project. However, approved project isn't defined. So as staff, we've been sort of thinking through when the best time that would be. And it's our recommendation to this board that we not establish the committee right now. And we actually establish it once we're ready to move into the construction and implementation phase. And the reason for that is that the work that we're currently doing, is still within the planning phase. You'll remember that we amended the JEPA last month to clarify that the planning phase would continue until it was all permits were obtained and it was time to move into construction and implementation. And so given that the work is very similar to what has been done to date, it seems most appropriate for that Environmental Compliance Committee to be established once we're ready to move into construction and implementation. That being said, of course, it's a board advisory committee and it's a board decision when to establish that committee. So we wanted to bring this item before you to get some feedback. And if the board's comfortable with staff's recommendation, no actions required, and we'll move forward as we've recommended. If the board would like to move forward with establishing the committee, we just need that direction. We can bring back a resolution to a future meeting to get that started. I'm happy to answer any questions.
You have any questions from the board? No? Oh, go ahead.
Fine. Thank you, President Palmer. No, just a comment. I appreciate staff reviewing this and identifying that sort of ambiguity of the term, approval. And so, committees and participation take a lot of time out of everyone's time, day. And I think it's important that those committees are focused and they generate and provide value to committee members and those participating. So I'm glad that this was under review. Thanks.
Yes. Yeah, as we were discussing this, I know that there was some issue in terms of when might this sort of thing happen, and I truly appreciate the legal opinions and the staff work on this to basically put this forward in terms of something that not quite yet, but at some point in the future. And then I understand, Josh, is that we will, we do decide as a board that this comes up, we can basically bring this forward at any time, correct?
That's correct. And another thing to add is, of course, that this doesn't mean that we won't be doing outreach efforts. Of course, you've heard from Ms. Martinez on the efforts the DCA is making, and as well from DWR. There's substantial outreach efforts that are ongoing regardless of this community being established.
Right. It makes sense that it would happen at a future date. Yes.
Thank you. Just I guess one other bit of context to add here. So we had the Stakeholder Engagement Committee, which you're very well familiar with, President Palmer, for a couple of years through 19 through 21. Yeah. As we were considering the wind down of that committee, one of the key considerations was the beginning of the public process associated with the CEQA efforts that the department was leading, and not creating confusion with engagement and involvement, with there being maybe a lack of clarity or misunderstandings about the role of that committee relative to those other more regulatory mandated public processes. There are still permits remaining that have also mandated processes of their own. And so, again, considering the intent and timing of this committee, I think that's another factor to consider. But I think it's completely in line with the conversation here, but just wanted to add that as well.
But it makes sense when we start to think about construction. Obviously, we're the construction authority, so that would make a lot of sense in terms of us becoming more involved in that type of thing at that point. Okay, do we have any public comment on this?
President Palmer, we do not.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And I really appreciate how you've worded this and put this forward. Okay, so moving right along, let me put my pages here. Okay, this is C, it's 6C, adopting a resolution establishing the DCA Finance Committee and ratify the president's appointment to the committee. Okay, well, did you want to introduce the concept first, and then I can talk about what?
Do you mind?
Go right ahead.
Speaking of committees, which, building sort of off of that last conversation, I do think that, in the past, we've had budgets as small as on the order of 21 million a year. Our past budget this year is 40 million. We anticipate something similar in the next fiscal year, but as the program continues to grow and progress, I do expect that the complexity of the budget process, the complexity of the activities being undertaken will continue to grow. And so I think it's I appreciate your consideration, Chair Palmer. I think the timing is right to start reevaluating our processes and considering how we allow this process to also grow with our likely expanding budgets and work scope.
Okay, so basically as I was talking to folks about this and going over what we might be needing in terms of a finance committee, just to keep everybody apprised of what my thought processes were as we were looking at this. What I was looking for is, one of the things I wanted to do is see if we could get some of the alternates involved in this. There, you can put alternates on a committee of this nature. There does have to be a regular board member chairing it, and so that was one of the considerations. Also, I was trying to, I mean, all of us have had experience dealing with budgets, and so everybody who is on the board right now is qualified to look at this. It was a question of who has the time and who's willing to put forth the effort. And also what I was trying to do is look at terms of what the distribution might be in terms of representing, you know, people from the southern part of the state, middle and more northern. And so as a result of that consideration, I talked to several people, and Gary Martin has very graciously consented to chairing this committee. And Martin Millibar has also graciously consented to be on this committee. And then I was looking for other people. I put myself on the committee because we need to have an alternate. And as of this summer, I will be an alternate. So yeah, I will be at that point, the lone alternate on this. And so the three of us will work on this. And of course, with the input from the staff and basically getting back to everybody else on the board. So that is my proposal.
Madam President, are you looking for a motion? I move that we adopt a resolution and ratify the appointment by.
Second.
I'm happy to second.
Okay, before we get to that, we should see if there's any public comment.
President Palmer, we have not received any public comment requests for any of the items on the agenda to this point.
Oh, and you know, I forgot to ask if there's any comment from the board.
Just a quick question, and I'm fully supportive of the you know, the process. So will this be kind of the membership be visited on a regular basis, like on an annual basis, for example, or what's the thought right now, or have we not gotten to that point yet?
I think we haven't quite gotten to that point yet.
Okay.
Block myself out. As currently proposed in the resolution before you, it would be a 2-year term. That would be on a fiscal year basis with the initial appointment expiring in June 30 of 2025. However, that is absolutely a decision point for this board. So if there's a desire to modify that, we would just need to modify that in the resolution when we're adopting it.
Anybody? Well, we had a first and a second at this point. So yeah, any other comments from the board? And any comments from the public again?
Comments from the public?
Let's bring it to a vote.
Gladly. President Palmer.
Yes.
Director Millibar. Director Martin.
Yes.
Director Luna.
Yes.
Director Estremera.
Aye.
Director Chang.
Aye.
And Director Anaptawi.
Yes.
Excellent. Very enthusiastic, yes.
Madam President, for the record, I just want to announce my presence that I've been at the meeting. I know my votes will record that, but just wanted to make it official.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so now we are getting on to, here's a good one. Economy of the State Water Project Report. Looking forward to this
President
one.
Palmer, if I may introduce our speaker. Today we have with us Ryland Gervais, who joined the Department of Water Resources in October of 2019 as policy advisor for the State Water Project. As policy advisor, Ryland leads key communication initiatives and projects, helps develop policy for special projects in the Sassoon Marsh and Bay Delta. Ryan also manages the State Water Project's federal funding program. Prior to his role at DWR, Ryan advocated water and environmental policy for local governments as a legislative representative for California Special Districts Association from 2017 to 2019. From 2013 to 2017, Ryland developed legislation as legislative aid for Oakland Assembly member Rob Bonta. Ryland graduated from Sacramento State University with a Bachelor of Arts degree in Government and Spanish. After graduation, Ryland was selected as a Jesse M. Unruh Assembly Fellow, where he learned the legislative process and was mentored by senior staff in the California State Assembly.
Welcome.
Graham, for that very kind introduction. As Graham said, my name is Ryland Gervais, and I work for the Department of Water Resources making sure this is on, as a policy advisor for the State Water Project. Today, I am very excited to share with you all the results of a economic analysis that the department performed on the State Water Project. You might be asking yourselves, why is it so important for DWR to understand something like this or go out and sponsor a study on the economic impact of the State Water Project? Well, for context, the State Water Project's infrastructure is aging. The majority of the project is now over 60 years old and requires billions of dollars in investment to refurbish and rehabilitate. And that's just to provide the same level of water service that we do currently, which is about 2.4 million acre feet of water a year. That also doesn't account for an expected 10% reduction in California's water supply due to the impacts of climate change. In order to account for that, SWP is going to need to build massive infrastructure projects like the Delta Conveyance Project to help modernize our water system for the effects of climate change. So keeping that in mind, the state water contractors are going to be unlikely to bear the brunt of this fiscal investment all by themselves. This is going to require DWR to go out and make the case for state and federal investment in our water system. So really what this study is a tool in our communications toolbox at DWR to help explain to policymakers, to legislators, as well as members of the public why the State Water Project is so important and why we need to consider investing taxpayer dollars in restoring the infrastructure. So with that, I'm very excited to share some of the key takeaways from our report. You could move to the next slide. Thank you. So the first part of our study compared the State Water Project service area to other national economies. Now, what I mean by service area is really that portion of California that receives some or all of its water from the State Water Project. That's about 27 million people and 750,000 acres of irrigated farmland across the state. So the first key takeaway that our study found was just this portion of California served by SWP Water has a GDP of $2.3 trillion, which if this area was its own nation would be the world's 8th largest economy. As you can see on the graph I have up here on the screen, that would put the State Water Project between the economies of France and Italy. You can also see that California, the entire part of California, is $3.4 trillion GDP, which makes that the 5th largest economy in the world if it were to be its own nation. So clearly one of the takeaways is that the State Water Project is feeling a great deal of economic growth in California, well more than the majority of the entire economy is supported by the State Water Project. Our study also looked at a comparison of economies supported by other major water systems in the world. We found that the State Water Project supports the largest economy in the United States out of any major water system, and actually supports the 2nd largest economy of any water management system anywhere in the world, and it's coming second to only one water system in China. Finally, this portion of our study, we looked at median household income. We found that the median household income of the service area of the State Water Project is about 20% higher than the rest of the United States, showing that there's a significant economic benefit to having a stable and reliable water supply provided by SWP. If we could move to the next slide, please. So the second part of our study compared alternatives to the State Water Project to see if it would theoretically be cost effective to replace State Water Project water with another source. We looked at a variety of different sources, including water conservation projects, stormwater capture, water recycling, as well as desalination. If you look at the graph that I have up on the screen here, you can see the range of costs for SWP water start at about $250 per acre foot, and that's for our customers in the Central Valley. And that ranges all the way up to almost $1,500 per acre foot, and that's if you're a customer on the Central Coast, and that's primarily due to pumping costs, and the extra energy of getting the water to those places. Really, the only other alternative source of water that was comparably cost effective, or rather I should say similar in terms of the cost, or water conservation projects. You can see they're starting at around $400 per acre foot, ranging up to $1,500 per acre foot. The thing to keep in mind with a lot of these water conservation costs, or projects rather, is that they are much less scalable to a utility level like the State Water Project is. When you're looking at the lower end of the scale, those $400 per acre foot projects, you're talking about low flow toilets, you're talking about high efficiency shower heads or high efficiency appliances, stuff that simply is not going to produce the scale of water that the State Water Project makes available to our contractors. The other sources of water, including stormwater capture, water recycling, desalination, were comparatively much more expensive. Also, one thing to keep in mind with these projects is that these figures don't include the cost of conveyance. So if you're building a desalination plant on the coast and you want to build out conveyance infrastructure to communities inland, that's going to add a substantial amount to the cost of those projects. So really the takeaway from this section of our study was the State Water Project is in fact one of the most affordable and cost-effective sources of water in California. Move to the next slide. So the third part of our study looked at the impacts on disadvantaged communities in California and really took a deeper dive into who the State Water Project serves. We found that our affordable water from the State Water Project is vital to 8.2 million people living in disadvantaged communities in California, which would be about 3/4 of all the residents who live in disadvantaged communities in California, and that 1 in 3 of our customers are residents of a disadvantaged community. If you look at the map that I have up here on the screen, you can see in the, I guess, orange-ish gold color, those are the disadvantaged communities within the State Water Project service area. The darker blue is the rest of the service area, which is not considered disadvantaged. And this is a median household income number. So you can see, or measure, you can see that a lot of those communities are in the Inland Empire in Southern California, Los Angeles. There's also a lot being served in the Central Valley, as well as the Feather River watershed. So again, the key takeaway from this part of the study was disadvantaged communities are relying in large part on an affordable source of water, which is represented by the State Water Project here in California. Move to the next slide. So the final portion of our study looked at the industries that are supported either directly or indirectly by the State Water Project. Obviously, the agricultural industry is one of the biggest beneficiaries from the State Water Project. Our study found that those 750,000 acres of irrigated farmland that receive water from the State Water Project produce up to $19 billion in agricultural products and other crops a year. And those agricultural products support up to 160,000 farm jobs in the state. So if you look at the graph that I have up there on the screen, those are the 4 major counties that receive that, 4 major agricultural counties that receive State Water Project water. You can see that there's been sustained growth starting from 1960, which is when the first part of the water project started getting built, all the way through the present. And you can especially see that with Kern County, which received some of the most explosive growth in agricultural production over that time period. And Kern heavily relies on State Water Project water to irrigate its farmland. We also looked at some of the other industries supported by the State Water Project. We found that 800,000 businesses are indirectly relying on State Water Project water, and those businesses support 8.7 million full-time jobs. So again, really the evidence is pointing to the State Water Project as a key part of California's economy, really helping drive agricultural production, full-time employment, as well as industry throughout the state. you move to the final slide. So with that, I know I just threw out a lot of facts and figures. I'm happy to answer any questions or take a deeper dive into the methodology. I just wanted to highlight one of our other communications efforts upcoming. This study came out in December 2023. We partnered with the Berkeley Research Group, who have a team of economists who help us put together these facts. That's not the end of the story. We're also working on a separate study. That one is going to focus on the other public benefits provided by the State Water Project, and that ranges from water supply to flood control to hydropower, environmental benefits, as well as recreational benefits. So really between the two of these, we're going to have a very comprehensive picture of the value of the State Water Project to California. And we believe at DWR, it's really going to help us make the case for projects like the Delta Conveyance Project, as well as help persuade policymakers and the public that we need to keep investing in our water systems. So with that, thank you very much for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
What kind of questions do we have from the board? Yes, go ahead.
I have a question.
Okay.
When you look at the agricultural production in California and where those products end up, do you have any kind of a feel of what percentage of agricultural production leaves California and benefits all the other states in the United States?
So that is a great question. Unfortunately, it was beyond the scope of our study. We did not look at what happens to those products after they leave California. But I'll make a note of that. If we do have the chance to follow up on that, I think that would provide definitely some very good messaging points in the future.
Oh, we're looking at the end user of the water, and you know, who pays for the DCA from the contractors, the farmers, and all that. The water's really in the product. The product leaves the state. The other states benefit from that, and there needs to be a full circle on the cost. You know, there needs to be some contribution from where those products end up, because the farmers can't control that. That's just part of the economy, and competition and all that kind of stuff. So I think it's a very important aspect when you're trying to find out where some of the money should come from. Anyway.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Ryan, for your presentation. Very compelling information supporting the importance of the State Water Project. I think that we all know, but before we saw this data, this actually reinforces it. My question has to do with the unit cost of water. You had various sources of water and how they price out on a $1 per acre foot basis. And I'm wondering, when Delta Conveyance is actually constructed and those costs are rolled in, is there any sense on how those numbers might change? It's probably not a fair question, but just wondering, just to be, fair.
Question. I think we can certainly expect those costs to go up. The department is definitely looking for ways to bring in state and federal dollars to help keep the cost of water down due to the necessary investments we're making. So fortunately, we do have some time ahead of us to really figure out how those projects are going to be funded. And that's part of what I do at the State Water Project, is managing our federal funding program, which is helping identifying, current opportunities, particularly through the infrastructure bills that have been passed in recent years, how we can connect those with the projects that we are looking to build in the department in California. So again, I don't have a specific answer as far as what those costs are projected to look like, but it is definitely on our minds.
It does seem that there's room for growth in state water project cost and still remain very competitive with alternative sources. One more question, if you don't mind. With respect to agriculture and all the numbers, the degree of which agriculture is important to the country and to the state of California, I'm curious if there's been any thought to what's going to happen when SGMA rolls out to completion and implementation, which may reduce the amount of agriculture we're able to do in the state of California.
Yeah, I don't know that I have a direct comment on SGMA, but my understanding is the department is very concerned. I mentioned earlier in the presentation about that 10% expected reduction in water supply. It's going to require, a whole toolbox of solutions, to really develop enough water to replace that. And that includes some of these alternatives that we have up here on the screen. I don't want to discredit water recycling or water conservation or any of the other projects. Those are definitely going to be necessary to help bridge that gap. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, we're looking to really ensure the water supply for the next 50 years. And basically every solution is on the table, whether it's delta conveyance, increasing water recycling, stormwater capture. Really the purpose of this study is to show how cost effective the state water project is in comparison to many of these alternatives.
President Palmer, could
Thank you very much.
Just add one thing for Director Martin in response to your question? A couple things that I would add. So in addition to the cost estimate that we're expecting to release in Q2 of this year, there will also be a benefit cost analysis released at the same time, developed by a group of economists working with the Department of Water Resources. So that will provide that full evaluation of cost versus benefits, acknowledging the timelines around construction timing and accrual of benefits and fully evaluated through that process. And then I would expect a next step likely to be supported by the state water contractors and then individually within your agencies, considering different financing alternatives and options, potential timelines associated with those. All of those would potentially impact the end rate that you're thinking of. And yeah, I would say that's coming, but it will just be through a process. But the near-term items with the cost estimate and the benefit cost analysis should shed a lot of light on the situation.
Is it end of Q2?
Q2, and it's in the timeline. I probably should have led with the timeline, but we'll get to it in the staff reports. But yes, Q2.
President Palmer, this is a really a useful document. Is this going to be made available to the board to share with our agency?
Yes, I forgot to add at the end of my presentation, I do have paper copies of a brochure. This is not the full report, but I believe that was linked in perhaps the board packet if you want to peruse that. But this really contains all the key facts and figures and really very nicely summarizes a lot of the information. So I have enough copies here for everybody, board members and staff.
A couple of your slides as well are kind of a nice little compendium of some of this. That'd be great. Good. Okay, Director Luna.
Thank you for the opportunity and thank you for the presentation. I did get a chance to read the report and I appreciate the brochure because it has a good snapshot. I think for me, this really highlights the importance of the Delta Conveyance project. When you look at the economics of it and, the state water project being 67% of the state's GDP, when you look at it number to number, that's huge. And if we don't act on making sure that we plan during non-urgent times, then we're looking at spending way much more money. And when I look at the numbers of 8.2 million people in disadvantaged communities that it serves, and we're in a state when we're the fifth economy, some would say the fourth, and I think we're there, but since then, and we have 1 million people that don't have access to water, to clean, potable water, then our inaction, and when I say our, I mean our collective inaction, would further exacerbate that number. So we have a huge responsibility. I feel very fortunate to be on this board, to be able to plan for and educate on this issue of the needed. So I thank you for this, because this really is a report that allows us to walk with and not talk about could, but this is what it has done, and this is when we're at. So the facts are there, and it just, you know, when people oppose a project, and I'm not pointing the finger at anybody, but based on just opposition and not looking at the new numbers and the facts of how it serves and how it can serve. So this is for me, this was a report that just is very helpful in the communication aspect of, and I'm very thankful of the investments that the state has made that has allowed for us to have this reliable source of water in the state. So thank you for bringing this to us, Ryan. Really appreciate it. Thank you, Madam President.
Yeah, thanks, Ryland, for the presentation. And even though I think, you know, you make the graphics, you know, fairly simplistic, I fully appreciate how much work it went into it. I think it belies, you know, there's a lot of data, and I think you kind of, you know, painted in a very compelling story. I think we could spend, you know, hours on each one of these graphics if you wanted to, but you know, I'm thankful, you know, that you were able to kind of walk through it pretty expediently. Just a couple of notations here. I like when you started off the conversation by saying there's a recognition that the State Water Project is, you know, just a wonderful asset, I think, to the state, but you also recognize it's, you know, kind of outlived its sort of useful life in some degree, and, you know, investments need to be made. And these investments are sort of like the second part of your study, right? That, you know, up to now, I think all investments have been borne on the backs largely of the, you know, the contractors who, you know, bear the benefits. But, you know, there's also recognized, you know, others who benefit from this. So I very much look forward to, you know, the other part of, you know, the study. But I think, you know, your alternative source is really compelling to me because as one who actually worked in seawater desal once upon a time in my career, you know, I've always kind of thought that the values that were put on seawater desal was not realistic. And I think this is the, you know, one of the few documents I've actually seen it put it in the right price tag. You know, I'm not surprised to see it, you know, approaching the $5,000 an acre foot range. And, you know, we've always been kind of criticized. Well, you know, a lot of California is on the coastline. How come you guys just don't do seawater desal? And I think when you kind of compare the numbers side by side, without the cost of conveyance, you know, it really does paint a very compelling story. So thank you for that. And I think this will serve as well as we talk to our boards for the next stage of, you know, funding discussions.
Thank you, President Palmer. Wow, what a good conversation we're having so far. I wanted to say thank you, Ryland. This is such a treat to give us kind of this greater context, to take a pause and see the work we're doing under a greater context. I think we tend to have blinders on when we're trying to push through in certain phases, and you know, the project is in a certain phase right now, and so just really appreciate the ability to take a step back. And the term "too big to fail" comes to mind. I think we're all pretty familiar with that in the 2008. This is a major and important asset to clearly on the world stage here, and so I think it's important to recognize we can't be abandoning what is such an important part of the economy and the communities that this project serves. I did want to kind of give something came to mind when I was looking through your slides, which I thought were great. If you go back to the slide where you show the disadvantaged communities. And so I work for the Mojave Water Agency, which is in the high desert region, which I think probably is the winner there of the orange by area. And this is very much on my mind every day, right? The affordability of our water supply. Not only are we really far south in the state, so to import water costs us a lot of money. It's serving one of the most disadvantaged areas of the state. If you go up one more slide, I think where you show the alternatives, there you go. while you do show the costs, and you had mentioned, desalination to the inland communities is probably much higher than represented here. I think we also, what isn't shown here is the opportunity still available under those alternatives to develop. And so in an inland region where you have a closed basin, for example, recycling water is not, it's not going to add a bunch of new water source that you would expect if that water is otherwise getting lost to the ocean. So I think it's important to contextualize that in that light as well, to say, other alternatives are important to develop, and we can see that their costs range all over the place, but it can't, it's not always the entire solution isn't just to say, no, there's other things to develop. It needs to be, considered among, what is available to each region of the state. So I really appreciate this, and thank you for spending your time with us today.
I really like your idea about, or your thought there about other regions of the state. Not all regions of the state have the same opportunities available to them. And while we do have a very long coastline, we also have a large area of the state which is not on the coast. And so also I just wanted to basically reiterate something that Director Millibar brought out in terms of the agriculture. I mean, it is an important part of our national security. And we have to keep that in mind. And even though we do have other portions of the economy which play a large role in the state, agriculture it's more than just the dollars and cents. It is also, do you eat? and does the rest of the nation eat? And that's crucially important to keep in mind. Also, as you looked at the cost of conveyance here, that cost of conveyance, as you're looking at your state water project, is the cost of conveyance in that bar? Yeah.
So it would not be. Those are, I'm trying to remember, I believe those were pulled from Bulletin 132 from probably 2021, I want to say. So those costs would not yet be in there.
Okay. Yeah. So that just to be fair about where we put our cost of conveyance, but definitely.
President Palmer, can I
yes,
just clarify the question? When you say the cost of conveyance, because we're using that term interchangeably, whether you're talking about just moving water to those different locations, which I believe is what results in the large spread that we see, versus the Delta Conveyance Project. And I just wanted to clarify which you were asking about.
Oh, I'm just asking about moving water, period.
Moving water in general.
Yeah, in general.
Delta Conveyance Project. So yes, that would actually include the cost of conveyance. So that's basically what the state water contractors at whatever particular location
this particular point in time, that cost of conveyance that we have at this particular point in time is folded into there. And I think, as somebody already brought up, we don't have the numbers yet in terms of where that might move as we go through. And again, quite important. Okay, and I think all right. Anything else from the board? Nope. And Tony, did you have anything? I didn't call on you specifically.
No, I thought it was a great presentation. It's very helpful. Same comments as everybody else.
Okay, great. Then we do move on. Yeah. Yes. I saw that. And Ms. Osha Meserve, I see that you are online. So go ahead.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Osha Meserve, speaking on behalf of local agencies of the North Delta, which is a group of water and water districts and reclamation districts in the Northern Delta. And I had a little bit different view of this report, as you might imagine. I guess, first of all, I think it's insulting to say that the State Water Project in the Delta is a cheap source of water. I don't think the State Water Project's been paying the full cost of taking water out of this estuary for a long time. And that's part of the reason why the Delta is experiencing at times a permanent drought from harmful algal blooms, increases in salinity, and that our fisheries, and particularly salmon and other listed fish, are in such poor condition. So I don't think it's anything to brag about. I think it's interesting that this report, the reason for it is basically an admission that this project, the tunnel project, couldn't support itself we've always been told, ever since I've been involved in the Delta conveyance discussion going back to 2008, that this project, the beneficiaries would pay for it themselves. And I think it's pretty obvious that that can't happen here, that the beneficiaries don't want to pay and can't pay. And I think that's a big problem. I think also the report is wrong in that it seems to infer that because state water project water is delivered to these areas, that's why it's, you know, the economy is working. Certainly water is an input. I didn't see any kind of effort to try to balance what all the different reasons why the economy might be doing certain things in certain areas and not others. In addition, you know, I think without factoring in the cost of the tunnel, these charts are pretty useless. I think we really need to know what that cost of the tunnel is. And I know you guys are working on that. And I think we're all interested to see what that cost is. And then in addition, I think that the state water project could be investing in some of these other alternatives. I think it's a false choice that, oh, it's the tunnel or, you know, doing more with recycling, or like brackish water treatment. And the other thing to keep in mind is that the way the EIR is being put out right now, it's saying that the tunnel is going to serve your needs about 15% of the time. So the project isn't saying that you're abandoning this existing infrastructure, and that existing infrastructure needs to be maintained, as you guys admit. So I think it's time to get going on maintaining that existing infrastructure and having more respect for the Delta communities that bear the brunt of these actions already, and even more so if the tunnel was ever built. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Meserve. Yes, I think you did mention kind of an all of the above type of thing. Any other public comment?
President Palmer, we do not have any other public comment requests at this time.
Okay, then let us move on to, and thank you, Mr. Gervais. We really, truly appreciate your input. And oh, yeah, she'll make sure we get them. That would be great. Thank you. I'm looking forward to having my own copy. Okay, great. All right, so let's move on then to reports and announcements. At this point, we've got General Counsel's report, please.
And thanks, President Palmer. My written report's in the packet. The one item I wanted to highlight is it's that time of year when it's time to file your Form 700, the Statement of Economic Interest. Those are due April 2nd. And I believe Ms. Rodriguez will be sending out a reminder shortly. If you have any questions, please let us know. Thank you.
That horrible reminder. Okay. Okay. Anything else? Nope. Okay, then let's move on to Treasurer's report.
Good afternoon, everyone. So this report is it's also included in your package, and we can adjust it just a little bit. Thank you. And this report is a little dated. It's for December and January of this past few months. It's, as you can see, that we ended the balance a little high in January at a little over 1 million. Typically is because we receive money and just not in time to pay the bills. So after January, we did pay some of those bills. So I'm expecting that the balances really usually drop to that advance that we get of 800K. We do ask them to advance this money to pay the bills that we must pay and prepay ahead of time. And as we pay those bills and other bills coming up, that number will fluctuate, but it really ends up usually around that number that we've got advance for. And as you can see in the report, we did end up there with our balances of our prepaid expenses of a little over $200,000. We have accounts payable. They usually run a little higher because we do not send everything to DCA until we have everything all wrapped up from DCA. And so we had $1,174,917 respectively for accounts payable. Now, at net position, we always account for our net position after we pay the bills, and everything else we had was $219,242. We do track our actuals to budgets, but as I told you previously, I don't tend to look at this report lately and report to you because we have some discrepancies sometime waiting for DCA to reconcile. So we have left that reconciliation to to Graham. So I really just now report on our costs and balances. But at the end of the year, we do reconcile and report everything to you. So you have all the reports attached to that. If you have any questions, happy to take any questions.
Do we have any questions from the board? Nope. And okay, do we have any public comment?
President Plummer, we do not have any public comment requests.
Well, thank you so much. Much appreciate all your hard work on this.
Thank you.
Okay, then let us move on to the DCP Communications Report, please.
President Palmer, if I could jump in real quick, and I think we have our communications manager, Valerie Martinez, on the line, who's gonna take over, but I just wanted to pull this exhibit up, and I think it provides some helpful context to a lot of what we're talking about at this board meeting and then the board meetings to follow. Just to put all the activities into context, we do have a very busy year. You know, we have acknowledged with where we are today in mid-February, some of the near-term permit activities, but to show specifically the engineering aspects, which the DCA is responsible for. We've got our updated cost estimate, benefit cost analysis coming in about middle of Q2 timeframe. And then that preferred project engineers report identified for end of Q3. And then I'll just tee this up for Catherine Marquez, who's going to be providing the environmental manager summary after Valerie's communication summary. She might also want to reference this graphic, but I do also ask that if the board finds this useful, this is something that we could more formally adopt and introduce into the monthly report or in some other location if you think this would be beneficial to track on.
I find it to be quite useful to look at this. Okay, all right.
Thank you. Valerie, if you're there, go ahead.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, my apologies for not being there this month. Unfortunately, there were some conflicts, but good afternoon, Chair Palmer and board members. Our communications efforts continue to be a collaborative effort with the DWR and Governor's Office to support shared information and materials development and distribution. As you can see by the chart that our executive director just put up, there's a lot of planning for the various rollouts that are coming up over the next 12 months. Each one of these, you know, to quote Director Luna, it's a huge responsibility that we believe is absolutely incumbent that we make sure that we are pushing out this information in a very public way, ensuring that communities understand that throughout the state what the project is and all the different components of it. So we're working really closely with, again, the governor's office and with DWR as a group to make sure that we are being very intentional about pushing out this information in a very transparent way. We also have been working, DWR has put out some beautiful materials over the last couple of weeks, including the document that you just saw. It again comes with a brochure that has a lot of the information. If any of you would like some of those, a packet of those, we can go ahead and make sure that we facilitate that for you so that you can go ahead and get those to your different member agencies so that you can put that out and get that to your own public affairs folks in order to push that out. As well as there's a 2024 Fast Facts that has the new information about the project as it now stands with the Bethany alternative. Again, another great document to, you know, give to your public affairs folks at your various agencies or to your general managers so that when they're out doing community outreach events, you know, again, that provides that understanding that we're looking for. We continue to work on the closer looks. If you have time, we highly recommend taking a look at the tunneling video, which is a video and a fact sheet. It really does lay out beautifully what the project is going to look like, how it's being built, all of those sorts of nuances. And it really drives the point home at both the importance and the magnitude of the project. We also have a pile driving video and fact sheet that's out. Again, another great piece, as well as a seismic video that talks about how the project addresses seismic issues. From a social media standpoint and digital media, our Facebook our Facebook account grew by about 100 likes. Again, it's that time with an elevated awareness of the project as a result of the release of the final EIR. More and more people are tuning in. There was a lot of media coverage. So again, we have just by the numbers, our Facebook page grew by about 100 likes. Our click-through rates for the work that we're pushing out continues to be at about 2%, which is huge because again, typically it's about 0.8%. To put that into numbers, that's about 104,000 video plays with over the course of 2 videos just in the month of January. So the content that we're putting up is resonating. People are looking at it and watching it and trying to understand exactly what the project is and what we're saying about it. Our website views are also incredible. We had just in the last month, a little over 1,700 people come to our website and review materials, etc. We're continuing to work with our partner agencies to ensure we're providing support with materials and project information as needed. Right now, specifically, we're focusing on the PWA one-pagers. If in fact, I think we've done like 7 agencies, and we're kind of doing them based on requests by the agencies. We are doing outreach, coordinating with them through DWR. I know that they're reaching out to all the GMs, but if in fact we have not done one for your agency and you would like us to do that, just let us know and we will get that done. We're continuing to, again, the alignment tours are going to start up again. Last year, we were able to do about 200 people to the person every time they go on an alignment tour. They feel like they have a better understanding of the project. And so it really is a valuable tool to help people understand what it is and how it is, and how it's impacting communities. The executive director and Ms. Buckman have teamed to provide briefings and updates to some of our member agencies. The GMs put in calls and they show up and provide those briefings to the boards in the community. We're about to begin preparing for Aqua. Claudia Rodriguez and her team have already secured a booth in a strategic location with high traffic, so we're excited about that. And the legislative education program is beginning to take shape. We're excited about that. Director Luna, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
I was just smiling because I think we have the right consultant when she expresses and demonstrates excitement over a pile driving video. And the worst is I share that excitement. But I think you described that we're on track with outlining a cadence and identifying the parties that we will be engaging with. I'm really happy with the progress we've made with meeting with Department of Water Resources, this team. So I think we'll have more to offer. Perhaps if not at the April meeting, we'll be more substantive to where we are. And so as part of my responsibilities as the legislative liaison is to come back. And so I think the April would be a good time to report some substantive progress. I would, being at the Delta Conveyance Finance Authority part of the meeting earlier today, I would say it'd be great if we can offer Valerie to do a presentation to that committee, because there was a lot of thirst for wanting to understand the tools and everything that's available. So maybe an outreach presentation to that committee would be great. My suggestion.
You betcha. All right,
any other
that's it.
Comments? Any other comments from the board? I just wanted to reiterate that we do have some folks going off to the Aqua DC meeting and conference. So just send stuff off to me if there's stuff that, and that goes for Josh too, if there's stuff that I should take with me on that, or particular people that you think it might be useful to contact. Okay. Anything else? Director Estamera, I don't want to ignore you in there. Nothing?
Nothing.
Okay, do we have any public comment on this?
President Palmer, we do not.
Okay, great. Let's then get on to the DWR Environmental Managers Report.
Hello, Claudia, can you bring up the milestones? Thank you. So it's a pretty short update today. As you all know, we finalized our EIR at the end of 2023. And so this year, if you look at the green highlighted items here, we're primarily focusing on the water rights process. So submitting a change of point and diversion petition to start the water rights hearing later in the year, and the Federal and State Endangered Species Act compliance. So we're looking to hopefully complete those processes later this year as well. And then, of course, the Army Corps is still coordinating on their NEPA document as well. So those are our big focuses this year for permitting.
Questions from the board? Nope. Tony? Nothing? Okay, any public comment?
No public comment requests, President Palmer.
Okay, great. Then thank you. Do we have any verbal reports from the board or anything? Any verbal reports, folks? Anything you wish to? Nope. Okay. Then future agenda items. Does anybody want to bring up anything for a future agenda item? Nope. Okay, then I do believe we're on to general public comment. And this area of public comment is for items that are within the authority's jurisdiction, but not on the agenda at this time. So speakers are generally limited to 3 minutes each. However, I may further limit this when reasonable based on the circumstances. Persons wishing to speak may do so remotely through the electronic meeting link by scanning the QR code or teleconference number when recognized. The DCA encourages public comments and requests that speakers present their remarks in a respectful manner within established time limits and focused on issues which directly affect the DCA or are within its jurisdiction. So do we have any public comments on items not on the agenda?
President Palmer, I did a second check and we have not received any public comment requests for this item.
Okay, great. Then ladies and gents and anyone else, we're adjourned.
I'm out of here.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, bye, Tony. Take care. And bye, all the alternates as well. Thank you, folks, for showing up.
Thank you.